Howdy y'all, what is up? Welcome to this week's episode of Catholics with Bibles. And y'all, it is a good week. And you're thinking to yourself right now, Chase, why is it a good week? Well, I'm going to tell you why it's a good week. It's a good week for a few different reasons. First and foremost, because God is good and every week is good. Just depends how you look at it, and it's a super cheesy answer, but anyway, that's it. But the second thing, also, this is the last week of school here at St. Teresa's. For those that don't know, this podcast is sponsored and run by St. Teresa Catholic Church and School. I am the Director of Youth and Young Adult Ministry here. And so it's last week of school year, which means I'm going on vacation for the next 2 weeks. So what does that mean for the podcast? Well, it means for the podcast, there's not going to be a podcast for the next 2 weeks. What does it mean for me? It means I'm going to take 2 weeks to chill with my fam jam, read some books. We're going to on a little beach vacay to Gulf Shores, Alabama. And if you're thinking to yourself right now, Chase, why are you going to Alabama? It's because Gulf Shores, Alabama is about 45 minutes west of Pensacola, Florida. And Florida is beautiful, which means Gulf Shores is equally as beautiful. It's just cheaper. Very exciting time in the Krause household. And if you're not going on vacation at any point in the next 2 weeks, I'm sorry. I will enjoy it for you. Hopefully you go on vacation soon. I actually just got done reading this book called Leisure, the Basis of Culture. Fantastic book. You should read that book if you haven't. It's by this guy named Piper. Piper? I don't really know how to say his last name. He's German. But anyway, leisure being the basis of culture, really just saying that, as human beings, we need to rediscover this ability that's in our nature to have leisure. And leisure is not laziness. Leisure isn't recreation. Leisure is the ability to contemplate the good, true, and beautiful, right? And the only way you can have leisure, though, is if you're not just constantly working, right? So if you are constantly working, if you're constantly stressed out, if you're constantly just blowing and going, take some time for yourself. Have that leisure. Have a nice glass of wine, maybe some whiskey or some bourbon. Smoke a nice cigar. Go on a nice hike. Have leisure time where you can contemplate the God, the good, true, and beautiful. With that being said, we are, I was trying so hard to finish this journey and Man and Woman He Created Them this week because it's like I'm going on vacation. Like, let's just wrap it up this week. And I was like, no, I'm just going to do it. We're going to end with today's episode. Doesn't matter what I'm skipping. And then I just kept reading ahead, kept looking. And I'm like, I need at least 1 or 2 more episodes to feel like we did it. We got through everything we needed to get through. So that being said, we will have a 2-week little hiatus, and then we're going to come back and wrap up Man and Woman He Created Them. We've been doing this for a while, which is kind of exciting. And I have our next mini-series in the work, but stay tuned for that one. I don't want to give it away. Cliffhanger, bring me back in 3 weeks. But anyway, today in Man and Woman He Created Them, we are actually getting into JP2's undelivered addresses. So JP2 has a section of addresses, an audience, I think it's like 103 through 113 or 115 or something like that, on his commentary on the Song of Songs. And he wrote these, but he never delivered them. And so, audiences, 1 through 102 or 103 he delivered, and then he delivered a conclusion. But there's a section in here with Song of Songs, Tobit. He actually never delivered, but he did write. And so we're going to get into the Song of Songs today. And so a few things with getting into the Song of Songs, right? It's Old Testament, obviously. And this is one of those books where, as a wannabe biblical scholar like I am, and the reason I say that is because I have a master's in biblical theology. I don't have a doctorate, and I can't get myself to call myself a theologian because I just have a master's, and I've met theologians who do this professionally with PhDs, and they are just way smarter than I am. So I'm not going to call myself a biblical theologian. I'm a wannabe biblical scholar. And so as somebody who's a wannabe biblical scholar, I spent a lot of time in the Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon, whatever you want to call it, during my master's for a few reasons. The original reason I spent so much time in it was because it's just such a fascinating text, and it's so beautiful, and it's so rich, and it's just kind of, it's very visceral text, right? And I think anybody who reads it is at least, intrigued by it. But then as I kept researching and studying it, the next thing that really caught my attention was how many people vehemently disagree on what the Song of Songs is about. And so, what do I mean by this? Well, the question is, there was an original human author of this text, right? There was an original human author of this text. What was their intention, right? Why did they write this text? So there's a few different theories out there floating around in the biblical scholarly world, and in the Catholic tradition too. There's saints who disagree on this, right? So one thought that's held by a lot of Israelites, now Jews, is that it's an allegory of God and Israel, right? Of God's relationship with Israel, right? And later on in early Christian history, the church fathers, some viewed this text as an allegory of Christ and the church. Some viewed the text as an allegory between Mary and the Holy Spirit. Others viewed it as God's relationship with the soul. And so, as historical critical scholarship kind of came back up into play. The argument was made that it was literally written about a man and a woman. Later on, some scholars would say that it was actually a love poem written from King Solomon to one of his wives, the daughter of Pharaoh. Other scholars have put forth that it was originally a series of Egyptian love poetry that the Israelites adopted and made their own. And then a really, really recent theory is that it's an allegory between God and the temple, right? And that kind of encompasses a few of them. But anyway, long story short, you get the idea. There is no consensus on what the original purpose of this text is about. It is an extremely difficult text to read. And if anybody reads this text and thinks you instantly know what this text is about, you have not read it carefully, right? You have not understood what it's talking about. You haven't caught all of the just references to various places of the Old Testament. If you're watching this, I don't know if you can see this in my Bible, but there's a lot of blue, a lot of words, a lot of underlines, a lot of other biblical references here. And so of just my own personal study, and this is just, I honestly only really wrote down the ones because I have a certain opinion on what I believe is the original intent of the text, which I might get into at the end of this episode. I don't want to say it right away. But in reading this in light of Pope St. John Paul II's theology of the body, we'll start with what he thinks about it, right? So he believes that it is a text about a man and a woman, about a husband and a wife, right? He doesn't say it's about Solomon necessarily, even though for the longest time, Solomon was thought to be the original author of this text. There's problems with that view now when you actually look at the Hebrew and some other kind of close-knit stuff in there. But needless to say, there's an argument to be made that it has Solomonic origins and that it was later kind of developed. So maybe Solomon did write something like love poetry similar, because we know that Solomon did write a lot. And so maybe it was oral tradition later finally put down by a scribe, so it has Solomonic origins and then got developed throughout history. So that is a thought. So with that being said, the Song of Songs, the great song, right? That's what this book is about. And so a lot of different ways you can look at this, but for JP2, what he did, he really only spends about, 8-10 audiences on this book. And he even says at the end in the last one, his goal isn't to give a commentary in the traditional sense of the text. He really just wanted to see how the Song of Songs fit within the sacramentality of marriage and within this, what he calls the language of the body, right? What he calls the language of the body. So one of the things that he points out early on is that when you actually read the text, right? We're actually going to read chapter 1 here in a second. We're not going to read the whole thing, even though it wouldn't take me that long. It's only 8 chapters. But when you read the text, we have this sense of the bridegroom and the bride viewing each other and really seeing their beauty, right? And JP2 is going to expound upon that. Before we get into it, let's just read chapter 1 here, and then we're going to talk about some of it. And this is going to really set the stage for the rest of the book. So we read this. The Song of Songs, which is Solomon. Oh, that you would kiss me with the kisses of your mouth. For your love is better than wine. Your anointing oils are fragrant. Your name is oil poured out. Therefore the maidens love you. Draw me after you. Let us make haste. The king has brought me into his chambers. We will exult and rejoice in you. We will extol your love more than wine. Rightly do they love you. I am very dark but comely. O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon, do not gaze at me because I am swarthy, because the sun has scorched me. My mother's sons were angry with me, and they made me keeper of the vineyards. But my own vineyard I have not kept. Tell me, you whom my soul loves, where you pasture your flock, where you make it lie down at noon. For why should I be like one who wanders beside the flocks of your companions? If you do not know, O fairest among women, follow in the tracks of the flock and pasture your kids besides the shepherd's tents. I compare you, my love, to a mare of Pharaoh's chariots. Your cheeks are comely with ornaments, your neck with strings of jewels. We will make you ornaments of gold, studded with silver. While the king was on his couch, my nard gave forth its fragrance. My beloved is to me a bag of myrrh that lies between my breasts. My beloved is to me a cluster of henna blossoms in the vineyards of En-gedi. Behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. Your eyes are doves. Behold, you are beautiful, my beloved, truly lovely. Our couch is green. The beams of our house are cedar. Our rafters are pine. Okay, so if you didn't know, Song of Songs is really a series of dialogues, right, between the bride and the bridegroom. And we don't get clear just like title headers in most Bibles because you can have arguments about when the bride and bridegroom speak, but most people agree that it's a conversation of poems between the bride and the bridegroom, or the lover and the beloved, right? The lover and the beloved. And so you instantly see, even in this first one, we have some archaic language, right? But I think everybody can agree that this language of love is a language of yearning. It's a language of beauty, right? Even in more archaic terms, like, it's always funny when you read your neck is like the Tower of David, and your teeth are like, sheep's flocks, and all these things you can kind of snicker at now. But we can see the artistry, right? We can see that the original author is using what he views as beautiful in the world of his surroundings to express his love to his beloved, to his bride, right? To his beloved. And so JP2 says love unleashes the experience of the beautiful, right? And I think this is so intuitive. And we're talking about theology of the body here. We're talking about a biblical interpretation. I think so often we abstract theology of the body and you keep it intellectual, but really the more we understand this, and hopefully as you've been following along with this mini-series, you've understood that all of the things we've been studying should make you more passionately in love with your spouse, right? Because if as husbands we're truly called to love our wives as Christ loved the church, and if women, you're called to receive the love of your husband as the church does Christ, right? That's a passionate love. That's a fiery love. That's an unbreakable love, right? And so this conversation between the lover and the beloved, the bride and the bridegroom, right? The pursuer and the one who's pursued. This love unleashes the beauty, right? I think we get that, right? I think we get that because I think, you can walk around any mall in America or any beach or any park and you can see other attractive people, right? And it's not lustful to say that somebody else is attractive or beautiful. Everybody is beautiful in one sense or another, but it's normal to see another person and of the opposite sex and say, yeah, wow, like they're gorgeous, they're beautiful, they're pretty. But it's different when you love them, right? It's different when you love them. When I first laid eyes on my wife, I remember to this day, I thought she was beautiful. I thought she was gorgeous, right? But on our wedding day, when I saw her walking down the aisle to me, y'all, I was like bawling. It makes me like tear up even just talking about it now. She was so beautiful. And my love for her was being fulfilled finally, right? And I think if you're married, hopefully you've experienced this where, hopefully you thought your spouse was attractive when you first saw them. when you first start getting to know them. But as the love deepens and as the relationship grows, love unleashes beauty. You see them for who they are, right? And JP2 even acknowledges part of that is physical, right? And that's good. You should be physically attracted to your spouse. But also you truly start seeing the beauty of the other's eye, who the other person is in their entirety, in their femininity, right? Or their masculinity. And so, chapters 1 through 4 is really, they just go back and forth about the other person's beauty, right? And even chapter 4, we have, behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. Your eyes are doves behind your veil. Your hair is like a flock of goats moving down the slopes of Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of shorn ewes that have come forth from the washing, all of which bear twins, and not one among them is bereaved. Your lips are like a scarlet thread. Your mouth is lovely. Your cheeks are like halves of a pomegranate behind your veil. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built for an arsenal, whereon hang 1,000 bucklers, all of them shields of warriors. Your 2 breasts are like 2 fawns, twins of a gazelle that feed among the lilies. And so he goes on, and it just keeps going on about how beautiful he thinks she is. But then also, within the Song of Songs, we have this other theme, right? And it's this theme of sister and bride. And so we see it for the first time in 4:7. So we read this. You are all fair, my love. There's no flaw in you. Come with me from Lebanon, my bride. Come with me from Lebanon. Depart from the peak of Amana, from the peak of Senir and Hermon, from the dens of lions and from the mountains of leopards. You have ravished my heart, my sister, my bride. You have ravished my heart with the glance of your eyes, with one jewel of your necklace. How sweet is your love, my sister, my bride. How much better is your love than wine, and the fragrance of your oils than any spice. Your lips distill nectar, my bride. Honey and milk are under your tongue. And it goes on. Just a quick aside. Hebrew boys weren't allowed to read this book until they were at the age of manhood, because the Jews and early Israelites thought it was a little bit too much for the Hebrew boys to handle. And remember that one of the commandments in the Torah, right, which all Israelites held on to, whether Sadducee or Pharisee, was you weren't allowed to masturbate, right? We read this in Genesis. It was that was it Genesis? Or was it in Exodus? Forgive me. But anyway, it's a story of there was a man who didn't consummate with the woman he was with. Instead, his seed fell on the soil, right, purposely. And then he was killed for it, right? And so the Israelites interpreted that as masturbation is sinful, right? And contraception even, if you're an Orthodox Jew. And so, Hebrew boys weren't allowed to do this because it's visceral language, right? But it's the language of love. It's the language of the body, and it's such important language. And so we have this idea of sister and bride. So we have lover and beloved on one hand, but then we have sister on the other. And it's weird language for us, right? Like, why is he calling her sister? And JP2 gives a few different potential explanations for this. In one sense, it's actually pointing back to the beginning, right? Which JP2 is always doing. Why? Well, Adam and Eve had the same creator, right? The same father, if you will, God. God created both of them. So in a certain sense, they were brother and sister, yet man and wife. And not in a weird way. Don't make it weird. But also, JP2 points out a deeper reason behind it was because when you actually look at, Song of Songs 8, what is it? 8, chapter 8, verse 8, we read this. We have a little sister and she has no breast. We shall do for our sister on the day, what shall we do for our sister on the day when she is spoken for? If she is a wall, we will build upon her battlements of silver. But if she is a door, we will enclose her with boards of cedar. Alluding to if she is chaste or unchaste, right? And so why call the beloved all of a sudden a little sister? Well, for JP2, he says it's because to show that the beloved, that the bridegroom, sees the lover, the bridegroom, sees the beloved for who she is, as the person. It's not just a purely lustful desire that the bridegroom or the lover has for the beloved. While, yes, he is extremely infatuated by her beauty, by her external beauty, by calling her sister, he is also acknowledging the fact that it's not just her external beauty that he sees and loves and longs for. It's for herself. It's for the peace of mind of the beloved, knowing that her lover, her pursuer, her bridegroom, sees her, all of her, right? Not just her body, but truly sees who she is, right? And so this idea of a sister and a friend too, right? It's another word that he uses elsewhere. It shows kind of the progression of love. Because why? Well, friendship implies equality. You can't be friends with somebody who you see yourself as superior as. Aristotle has, you probably heard this, the 3 different levels of friendship. Friendships of pleasure, utility, and virtue. And friendships of pleasure, it's just you have a good time, you can hang out with the other person, you enjoy some similar stuff. But if that common third is taken away, like say you love watching football with a football buddy, right? But if football's taken away, you have really nothing in common. It's a friendship of pleasure. There's also friendship of utility, which is like a work friendship, right? I mean, even me, I have relationships with some coworkers here, and we get along just fine, but we're probably not going to go get a beer after work or anything like that. It's a friendship of utility. Or think of like if you have a business partner or somebody you do business with a lot, you can be friendly, maybe even take them out for a beer every once in a while. But if it wasn't for the business relationship, you probably wouldn't be hanging out. And then you have friendships of virtue. And Aristotle says you really only have maybe 1, 2, or 3 of these in your entire life. Namely, somebody you see as totally equal and you want their best for, right? You want them to grow in virtue, they want you to grow in virtue, and your goal of the friendship is to make the other person more virtuous. And none of these are bad, by the way. It's not like one is higher and more superior than the other. They're just 3 different kinds of friendships that we all need. And so for the bride and the bridegroom, they start as friends. We read this elsewhere. This friendship, though, is a friendship of equality, right? Because that friendship is, you have to be equal to be friends. And we've all seen this too, right? Where if you're in you potentially new friendship, but all of a sudden the other person just always talks about themselves and always thinks they're better than everybody else, the friendship tends not to be too great. And then we have this idea of sister, right? Namely, this also equality, right? And also JP2 points out that love seeks common denominators. When you and your spouse, if you're married or engaged, when you first start dating, you're asking, where'd you grow up? What interests do you have? You're seeking common denominators, right? And the idea of sister implies common originality, right? Namely God, as the point back to Adam and Eve, but also common, parentage, if you will, that you're equal in more than one sense, but not in a literal way, obviously. And so love seeks common past. Love seeks the whole person for the sake of the beloved, right? And so finally, the last thing we'll talk about, and the last thing JP2 talks about, and I know we're like super breezing over Song of Songs, and that's okay. You should read it. It's a good book. JP2 calls it the revelation of femininity. We actually read this in chapter 6, verse 13 through 7:7. So we'll start in 13. Return, return, O Shulamite, return, return, that we may look upon you. Why should you look upon the Shulamite, as upon a dance before 2 armies? How graceful are your feet in sandals, O queenly maiden. Your rounded thighs are like jewels, the work of the master's hand. Your navel is a rounded bowl that never lacks mixed wine. Your belly is a heap of wheat encircled with lilies. Your 2 breasts are like 2 fawns, twins of a gazelle. Your neck is like an ivory tower. Your eyes are pools in Heshbon, by the gates of Bath Rabbim. Your nose is like a tower of Lebanon overlooking Damascus. Your head crowns you like Carmel. Your flowing locks are like purple. A king is held captive in the tresses. How fair and pleasant you are, O loved one, the delectable maiden. You are stately as a palm tree, and your breasts are like its clusters. And so JP2, he points to this, and it's this revelation of the beauty of femininity, right? And we ask ourselves, and this is one of the things where, we could probably do 15 million episodes just on the Song of Songs. We ask ourselves, why is this book in the Bible, right? And this is the question that I grappled with for a long time until I've come to my current view of what this book, its original authorship is for. Because it's in the wisdom literature. In the wisdom literature, it's all about applying the law to your life, right? When the book of wisdom, right? The wisdom of Solomon, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. These are all books that are trying to apply the Torah, the law, to the Israelites' lives. And so, why is this book in the Old Testament, right? And so, because of JP2's interpretation of that is between man and woman, if it is, it's trying to show the Israelites the depth of true love between a man and a woman, right? Of a husband and a wife. And so the final declaration of love for JP2 is chapter 8, verses 6. And set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. For love is as strong as death. Jealousy is as cruel as the grave. It's flashes of fire, O most vehement flame. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If a man offered for love all the wealth of his house, it would be utterly scorned. So why is this the pinnacle for JP? Well, set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. Love has met its purpose in unity. The two have been sealed together and are made family forever. And this erotic language of these poems, of the Song of Songs, it's an eros that leads to agape. It's a passionate love which leads to unity and leads to this reciprocal gift, right? And so with that, we'll end with just my 2 cents on Song of Songs. I disagree with Pope St. John Paul II on the original authorship and the original purpose of this book, which is one of the very few times I disagree with JP2 on stuff. But like I said, there's what's the original purpose of this book? There's the theory of God and Israel. There's the theory of Egyptian love poetry, of man and woman, of Solomon writing to Pharaoh's daughter, of Christ and the soul, of Mary and the Holy Spirit. And so, Christ and the soul, Mary and the Holy Spirit are kind of easier ones to dismiss because the original author did not know Jesus, right? It was this BC days, you know what I'm saying? Now, the divine author could have had that in mind. None of these interpretations are wrong. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying they're wrong. They could be spiritual interpretations or interpretations that God, as the divine author, did truly mean. But the human author is what I'm talking about here. And so my view is greatly influenced by Dr. Michael Barber, and some other scholars that he introduced me to. And my view is that the book of the Song of Songs is actually an allegory between God and the temple, which includes the interpretation of between God and Israel and God and humanity, right? Because why? Because the temple represented Israel, but also represented the whole world. There's a lot of reasons why I think that. A lot of them stem from just the language of the descriptor of the beloved. A lot of the same words are the words used to describe the temple in Hebrew. And a lot of the fragrances described are the same fragrances they would have burned in the temple. I also, it's one of those things where even John of the Cross thinks that this is about God and the soul. Like I said, I think that can be a beautiful spiritual interpretation. I don't think it was the original intent of the human author. But anyway, you should read it and see what you think the original author's intent was. I'm not going to make a big defense of why I think what I think. I think JP2's interpretation is beautiful and amazing and really, really applicable to man and woman he created in the theology of the body. But yeah, biblical scholarship, it's fun. Fun fact, after Genesis and the Psalms, this is, I think, the third or fourth most argued over text in the entire Old Testament. And with that, thank you for listening to Catholics with Bibles. We'll see you next time in 3 weeks because I'm on vacation. God bless everybody.